Welcome back into another episode of Making the Leap. We're so glad to have you with us today. We are really, really looking forward to our guest today. We've got our first follow-up, right?
It's an update show.
I like our little first that we keep bringing to you. So this one, really, right now, I think we're just seeing so much in terms of growth with different opportunities, options that are existing within the public school or within the private school sector. So we've talked about pod schools, we've talked about homeschool, we've talked about Christian school, private school, classical Christian, all these different options that keep coming our way for everything. Last year, we spoke with a couple, Amy and Matt Barnard, and they were just about to start a school called Refine KC. And we had talked with them in our old studio. Now we've got our new studio, have them with us today, and we're so glad to have you both with us.
Thanks for having us.
Good to see you both. Yeah, this is exciting for us because we talked about it in concept, and you guys were just getting ready to make this move. Now you've done it. Now you have some weeks and months under your belt. As we record this, you're on spring break, we found out. So what are we now? How many months since we last talked? What are we talking about from actual start of school to now?
It's probably been about 7 months?
7 months.
Oh, that's perfect.
Perfect.
So that's enough time to tell us what you know and what you still have to learn about starting a brand new Christian school. Wherever you want to start.
It has, it's been so worth it. It's been great to see God work in it. It's been a lot of work.
I bet it has. The work piece itself, I can't even fathom. I mean, we're partly, being here at Herzog, we see all the different boot camps that come through, and I don't know how familiar you are with Herzog and what they do, but we see, in fact, I was just speaking earlier with one of the board members, and he said last year they did about 20 of these different boot camps. This year they're pushing 50 that they have planned, which is amazing. And that to me says it is an exploding arena to dive into.
Yeah, and so with that in mind, what people need to know is, going in eyes wide open, the realities and the challenges and the things that you didn't see coming. So with 7 months in, you said it's been a lot of work. Let's start with work. Let's be honest and talk about maybe some of the things you either have run into that you knew were coming or you didn't see.
Well, I mean, it's basically it's a brand new ministry, and so we've entered the mission field. So we have learned to drop a lot of things personally. Having a guaranteed paycheck on my end. That's now Amy's the breadwinner, I guess you could say.
Wow.
To let things go like, insurance from public school.
You were a school teacher.
Was in public school for 28 years.
And I remember in our episode, which was on June 3rd, so for anybody that was interested that wants to go back and pull that, I think that actually gives a lot of good background. You actually didn't really retire per se. You just left, which is not a small thing. I know when we've talked with other teachers as well, that is not only just a huge pay cut, if you're going to enter something else, another form of education like you are, but just to drop it entirely, that's big. So that, not to interrupt you, but I just wanted to just a little background for somebody that didn't know that's you didn't just retire and take your pension, the retirement, you're done. Right. That's hard.
So I think for us, we see it as a ministry and a mission, but also, we're starting our own business basically. So whether we're writing articles of incorporation, writing bylaws, creating all the handbooks for students, staff, whatever, and then figuring out all the other things like, okay, what curriculum are you going to use? Who are you going to have on staff? And then bringing in, we've prayed a lot for God to bring us the families to come, having a location, and so just so many things have went into it, and we've had to be very, very obedient to God and be very patient. Amy and I we are planners, and we've really had to let the planning things of life just go. It's just like, okay, how are you going to use this? And what do we need to be doing? But I think in both of our roles, we've seen God equip us in things that we've done in the past to get ready for this.
Can we talk about numbers, Amy? When you start a school, I know anybody whose heart is in it and who's prayerfully entering into it, you want the best. You hope it'll explode. we've talked with some who have immediate interest, and there's dozens of families, and we've talked with some that can't find double digits. And sometimes that can be scary unto itself when you're starting a new project like this. Will the people come? What do you say about that? What do you have to show for it numbers-wise for yourselves?
Well, I think anytime that you're following God's calling, you are reminded that you have to be humbled a lot. So God doesn't typically burst out in numbers. That's not how God works. And we were like, oh yeah, God, we know you. We know these things. We expected it to really explode. And then we learned that we weren't ready for it to really explode. And we've, looking back, been able to see how God had prepared us for what he had given us. And that was it in that moment. So we started with 15 students.
Okay.
We still have all of those 15 students and more. We have more students enrolled for next year, but it's it's not just an explosion.
In June, you knew, when you started in June, you knew you had 15, or
Nope.
not at that point? You didn't know
No,
if you had any.
even.
Right.
Wow.
So
We had our own son.
So from
So you
June
had
to
one.
now it's grown to 15, and you say you really, if you're to be honest with yourselves, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you're saying that's about all you really needed.
Yeah, I think that we weren't equipped or prepared for, starting a huge school. We have been equipped as we needed to be equipped, and God has clearly brought specific families to our school in his timing. So it's been really beautiful, but also hard when you know that numbers equal income.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, and I think it's it's a cliche, right? Like the Garth Brooks song, "The Unanswered Prayers," right? You want it, you think you know what you want, but really, he knows what we need and what we want.
Yes.
Really, if we don't know that we do. So I
Exactly.
think that's a really key piece, not just for school starting, really, but for life.
Well, it's
You know?
I would imagine it's like anything. When you start something, you hang out the shingle, you open the door, you turn on the open
Right.
sign, and you wait for the people.
That's right.
And whatever the business is, sometimes that doesn't happen right away.
Mm-hmm.
But what
and
a
you gotta
great
be
way
okay
to
with that.
Yes.
Right. I was gonna say, what a great way to approach it, though. That I'm sure, I can't even imagine the worry and the fear that probably started, and then you had to kind of battle that with prayer, obviously. But just in retrospect, to know, oh no, it was okay.
So then let's be honest about this with folks that are
Yeah.
thinking they have it on their heart to start something like this, and now they've heard this, and they think, oh, maybe not. You would say what?
for us, we know that God called us to do this. So we were to the point where if we said no, we were being disobedient, and we were not. We would be just completely restless. So we didn't have an option. Like, if you know for sure that that God is calling you to do this, you don't have a choice. It's not necessarily fun when God calls you into places. It's not
Sure.
easy. So
Right.
I would say if he's calling you, you have to be obedient, but it's not going to be easy.
No, it's been a lot of late nights. It's I get to school at 7 a.m, and then I'm still working on things till about 10 o'clock every night. But I will say this: our students have grown so much, just not academically, but when you have students that say right before you're ready to start class and say, hey, can we take a moment and can we pray for my friend? Her grandma just passed away unexpectedly.
Wow.
Where our kids are in prayer, not for the things that they need, but for the things that other people around them need. And we've really tried to instill that prayer time, that, hey, if there's anything that you want to pray for, if we need to stop and do that, we're going to take the time to do that, whether it's us as a staff leading them in prayer, but also the students, leading prayer as well. And so that has been amazing to see, and just God work in the hearts of these kids.
That's amazing. And your enrollment, you said, was 15
To start,
To
yeah.
start, and you've grown since then,
Mm-hmm.
and you're growing for next year, which has to bring its own set of challenges, not just managerially, in terms of staffing, but in other ways, I'm sure. Can you talk a little bit about some of those? Because I think, it's really, I am all like, the heartwarming part is just knowing those kids know they're in a Christ-centered place, that they believe it, but there's more to student growth and more to some of the culture changes or the culture growth and things like that. I just wondered if you could speak to that a little bit, either one of you.
Yeah, we're so fortunate to have, we have 2 other full-time staff, and then Amanda Zaring, who her and her husband have come alongside with us from day one, she is there halftime as well. And I will say this, from the first day in August to now, it looks very different with what we're doing too. And so when Amy talked about, being small in number to start, we've been able to make changes because we've been on the smaller side. But I think too is because we are pre-K all the way through 12th grade, we started the year with ages ranging from 7 years old to 16 years old.
Amazing.
So in terms of managing that with a small staff, but a very wide range of ages, it's very, very challenging to schedule everybody in terms of their time to make it fit. But it did fit really, really well this year.
Wow.
And we do look like a little bit of a one-room schoolhouse sometimes too,
Right.
where I am teaching. So I'm teaching math from first grade all the way through algebra 2.
At the same time?
Different times.
Okay.
times. But I've learned to
Okay.
manage from I will take our lower elementary kids and I will work with those students for 45 minutes. But I can manage that where, I can do something all together with those students, and then I can split that group up into 2 groups, and so just those things as far as, it's different than public school, where some years I would have, classes of 25 to 30. And so you're managing that one big class doing pretty much all the same thing. Where here, I'm managing a smaller group of students who might be doing multiple things at the same time frame.
Well, what a cool blessing though that you have those skills, the education skills, because that is a hallmark, I think, of a good teacher who can say, we need to do this, we need to do this, and we need to do this, and how are we going to make that work and put those moving pieces together? That's a lot.
What does that staff look like then? So it's you teaching something like math. Who else on staff?
So I teach math. I also teach middle school and middle school and high school science.
Okay.
And then we have another staff person. She teaches all the elementary except for the math. And then we have another staff person. He teaches our Bible classes, and then he teaches PE as well. And then Amanda, who we talked about before, she is there halftime. She teaches the secondary English and history classes as well.
And your age ranges, again, you had said at one point it was early, like pre-K to 16 years of age?
So it's 7 to 16 right now.
7. Okay.
But we will have pre-K next year.
Okay. Okay.
And these individuals, these students are broken into groups or sometimes taught all at the same time?
A little bit of both. Our secondary students, we mainly keep those students together in kind of like your traditional classes. Math looks different because we really try to personalize that at the secondary level. Our elementary students, we try to break those students up into kind of a lower elementary, upper elementary. So they stay in classes for part of their day altogether, but we do break them down kind of based on where they're at.
I mean, talk to me about a scenario where you'd have a 16-year-old student and a 5th grader or a 6th grader. Is there I think probably most traditional setting-minded people like me would think, how do you talk to a 16-year-old and a 8, 9, 10-year-old about a subject in the same room at the same time?
Yeah, so we don't really have that happen at Refine KC. It's mainly, there's a lot of times we've got our secondary students, which would be our 7th graders up to like our 16-year-olds. But there are times where all of our kids interact. Like, we will go out and do some things. Like we're fortunate enough to have a ball field, so we will go out and do some things together as a school. And so, but we really have seen all of our students, and our students would tell you from the first day, they'd go, oh, I don't know if I was going to be like friends with you. It's like, and so, but they are like outside of school, they are they're good friends. They actually talk to each other at lunch. When they come in the door, technology is all gone, phones are away. So they actually sit at lunch and talk, and in classes they talk, which is what a novel idea, because I didn't see that in public school. It's like kids would get out their phones, and it's like, guys, you can talk, or the traditional pass notes like we might have done when we were in school too. but it's really been good to see our kids build the relationships, not only from the 7th graders to 16-year-olds, but across the board.
I was remembering Christine and I, when we were first talking about putting our daughter in a Christian school, it was a startup school.
Right.
And I think they were
10
talking about
kids.
10 kids.
10. Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest with you, we were sitting there looking at them and looking at each other like, we're going to put our daughter, take her from hundreds and hundreds of kids with staffs of teachers and throw her in a brand new startup thing with 10 kids of varying ages and a couple of people. It seemed really wild. I mean, it really did seem like a total leap. And we were going to do it until we moved.
Right. Oh, and we would have done it. And we kind of talk now like, well, that would have been really, really great for that circumstance. Or, but it really would have been hard when she was going to come home from school and see all her friends doing the same thing. We know that there were going to be challenges.
My point in saying that is the buy-in has to be from the families.
Has to be there from the whole group.
The families had to buy in, right? You can't, it's not like you can't twist someone's arm to want to do this.
Right.
That's why for us it really is working, because God has clearly prepared these families for this time at this school. And our families are amazing. And I mean, I think they've all seen their students grow so much in the 7 months that we've had them, that it's just, they're on board 100%. What do you need? We're here.
Is word of mouth now going to be critical in the way you grow? Are these families going to become sort of acolytes of yours?
I think that's probably the biggest. I mean, what do you want to know? I want to know what someone personally experienced. I don't want to read about it on a website. So I think that's our biggest key.
That's amazing. Do you have opportunities for parents to do any kind of teaching or volunteering, or what is your makeup with your parents and your families when they come in?
Yeah, we've put it out there. It's like, hey, if you're a parent and if you want to come in and volunteer, we have one parent who comes in as much as she's able to, and takes some of our younger students, and we'll spend, hour and a half, sometimes on Thursdays, and just have kids read to her.
That's
and
awesome.
So she can help with that. We've also done different things, events during the year, and we've had, every student has had a parent there at those events. And so that's
amazing,
100%.
right? That's not
Yeah.
not always typical. That's incredible. I think that's
Are there things
fun.
you didn't see coming?
Yeah.
Are there things now 7 months in that you just didn't see that
Those people who have to decide whether or not there's school the next day because of snow, they are underappreciated.
Yeah, I've had a few times this year. And I've set my alarm for 4:30 in the morning. I'm going, should we? Shouldn't we?
you get to make the call?
Because I never thought I would do that.
That's
and
like a small detail that you
It
just
is
hard.
Yeah.
and it's harder too, because our families are really spread out. And so that makes it harder too. It's like, okay, how's it on the Kansas side, since we're in Kansas City, and how is it up north, 15 miles or east 15 miles?
Well, and this last one was a doozy.
Yeah,
That was a
yes,
tough
it
little
was.
one, and no one was happy
That's
no
right.
matter what you picked.
It's very interesting you bring up geography, because there are two things on my mind that I'm thinking about as a parent. The finances and the geography. It's something that we hear about all the time. I don't have a school close to me, or, oh my gosh, it's a fortune. What do you say about those two things to prospective families?
As far as finances, we have a great third-party system. It's called Benefac, and it's a little time intensive. You have to plug in all of you do your tax return and plug in all of your financial details, but it comes back with a solid number of what you really can pay per month for all of your students. And then we have a finance assistance committee, and they meet with you and they say, does this really work for you? And generally it's pretty spot on, and then it's a go, and you pay what you can afford for us. So you don't pay
That's interesting.
full tuition if you can't afford full tuition, because
Okay.
we want it to be affordable for everyone.
And
So-
you have like you said, you have a finance committee. So you do. So that's something too that I'm sure you see it a lot too. I see it on social media. People automatically assume they can't afford it, and they don't actually go in and
We did the
really
same.
do the work, right?
Yep.
And just say, can I or can I not? Or do I need to cut something? Or I haven't even asked them what their tuition is.
Yeah.
I just assume I hear the word private or whatever,
This
and they
is so
stop.
important. No, I'd never heard this, what you just described before.
I have heard it once, and it was with the organization that I volunteered with back in Pennsylvania. They had the same thing, but it was
okay.
well, it was
I'd never heard.
based completely on like socioeconomic status. So it was a little bit different.
You do have a flat, you have a rate, if you will,
Yep.
that you would ask that people pay. But if they say, look, I just can't make that flat rate that you've made as a standard, then I can apply for aid or pay what I can.
Yeah, and we'll try to work it out as best as we are able to.
And that is something I just don't think there's a full understanding from people. I did not. I didn't realize really until we started that, if I worked at the school, tuition would change. I know we talked with one, I think after you guys, where, they said, we'll figure out tuition if you can come be here 2 days a week and help out. That there's so much more flexibility, not just in the classroom, but within the tuition arrangement, within the fees pay. And I don't know. I just think that's something that is not it's not, I don't know why it's not being made clear, because I feel like I sometimes beat my head against a wall saying, just make a phone call and ask first.
Yeah.
But I think maybe there's a little bit of fear there, or there's a little hesitation, or maybe they're just not fully ready to make that jump. So they blame it on the tuition costs. I don't know, but I think there's more in that for sure.
We love to ask the same questions because it comes up all the time, and that is activities and sports, activities and sports, activities and sports. I think we probably addressed it back in June when we talked. It's always the thing when people leave a traditional school setting. What about school sports teams? What about activities? You guys are a school of 15. You can't possibly have any of that stuff.
No, not yet, but the things that we do, we do a weekly chapel service. So we have some students who are really, really involved, our son being one of them, in preparing for that every week. So we are developing, the next generation of worship leaders in the church as well, which has been great. We have a volunteer from our home church who comes in and he does some applied science type things with them on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So, but yeah, we're not quite to the point where we're ready for the extracurricular things yet.
But
and it's like, well, that's in God's time too.
But I also think too, what you just said, like you've got, your son developing the worship leader, like those are, I don't want to step on people's toes. I don't want to say, I know
what you want to say.
I will say those are skills that are just as valid as skills learned on a sports field. And I think sometimes they're underrated.
You mean most kids aren't going to become professional athletes?
Well, they might not.
That's what you want to say. Just say it. That's what you want to say.
Yeah. But I really commend you for bringing that up, because I saw it a couple weeks ago at a banquet that our daughter was part of. And, that sports program at that school has grown immensely, but it was non-existent. And you don't necessarily have to have one. You don't have to have a sports program to still be a successful school. There are clearly, we know there's 1,000 options.
If
for
that's
sports.
that important, there are certainly outside ways for kids to go find that too.
Right.
But our kids during PE, they play a mean game of ultimate frisbee. I'm telling you. So they are very competitive in just small in numbers right now.
It's funny because I remember when we were having the conversation with this startup school, a lot of parents who thought, okay, I'll go to the informational meeting, and you could just tell in the tone of some of the questions, like, well, do you have an orchestra?
Yeah.
Like, no, we're two people and a room. Like, no, we don't have an orchestra. Like, you have to kind of manage expectations, I would guess.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. None of those people actually applied. We had a lot of those people. God worked that out.
Well, and I want to come back to the geography piece. I know we started there, kind of went to the sports and the geography. So one thing that we always laugh at, our daughter's getting a little older. So, the nights out are, they're not horribly late, but we live more rural. Her friends live further south, and so it's kind of that, oh my gosh, like I love that they're hanging out. I am not in love with driving late, and we've kind of accepted this is, you give something up to get something, right? I would much rather her be hanging out with those friends, with the like-minded families and if it means I make a 35-minute drive, that's what I'm going to do. Or that's, if it means we're up late or don't wait up because I'll be home, that's what we're going to do. What are some other, I guess, components of that geography piece that maybe people aren't thinking of besides a snow day or hanging out? Do you have a wide variety of families coming then from all over? You must, if you're looking at road conditions for snowstorms, you've got it.
We do. I mean, we have parents who are 15 minutes away. We have parents who are 40 minutes away. And so
Really? So
they've-
you do have a 40-minute. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
we do. So
How do people 40 minutes away find out about you? Online? How do they find you? And I'm not. This is not a knock, and they shouldn't
Yeah.
be come to you. But it's interesting when we hear from certain people that say, "Well, Refined KC sounds great, but it's too far away for me." Sometimes we discuss, "Well, could you start your own Refined KC?" Would you say that, or is it better to drive the 40 minutes to join with people like you that have already kind of gone through the fire? Does that make sense?
I think it depends on what you're called to do in that. Like, if you really feel like you're called to do that in your community, then do that. But as far as how they found us, I think a lot of them found out through word of mouth. And most of our people who are actually families in our school right now are not people who came to our meetings that we held learning about the school. They're literally like, God was like, here you go. That's a family that should be in the school.
Right.
And that's
And when you say a family that should be in the school, what do you mean by that? For somebody that is listening, it's like, what does that mean exactly?
Well, one, the family that's not looking for all of the sports programs, because even though, I mean, our son is a 16-year-old boy, he would love it if we had, you know, sports programs. He's very athletic as well as musical, but the bells and whistles are not something that a family is going to get in our school. They're going to get a lot of solid teaching, a lot of personalized learning. Critical thinking is something that I just can't say enough about. Our son has learned how to really become a critical thinker from a biblical worldview, and that matters so much more to me than any of those bells and whistles.
and a lot of back to the basics as well.
And so I think that's what I thought you were probably going to say.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that we've talked about this, that I think it's really important that families drill down on what they need. You guys weren't even in existence when we were here trying to figure out, like, where's she going to go? You know,
Yeah.
and I think, had you been, might have been a different decision. Like there's, you know, so I think it's great that there's these options now that are out there, because, but I do think families need to really, in prayer, in conversation with each other, being together on board, figure out what we want, because you're, like I said earlier, you're always going to give something up to get something, and you have to know that going in.
Could you have made your son do this if he didn't want to do it? Was there buy-in from him? Could you have forced him and said, we're doing this whether you like it or not?
We kind of did do that,
You did?
actually, yeah.
And was he ticked at you, and how's it gone? I mean, give me some of the highs and lows. A 16-year-old boy leaving what he knows and doing this is a wildly different
He
experience.
has grown a ton. Is it exactly what he envisioned his high school career to look like? Not at all. Would he change it? Some days maybe, but he definitely wasn't fully on board. We made this decision for him as his parents, as we needed to do. When he was 14, we pulled him out homeschooled that
Well, I was
year.
just going to say, you had already kind
Yeah.
of said, like, we're changing this, and you're going to homeschool
Was he
first.
mad at you for that?
Yes, very mad at us for that. Then school started, Refined KC started, and it didn't meet his expectations because he's a teenage boy.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's like, can we just go back to homeschooling? And I'm like, wait.
Which is interesting.
Let's remember how much you didn't want to do that. So I think he's just grown a ton, and he realizes why we've done what we've done, and his relationship with the Lord has just soared. So it's not perfect.
No.
Every day is not easy.
But you did
I think
something
like-
really hard at a time when most just don't. And I'll be honest, we've said this before, and we've
Right.
talked about this with our older sons, 16 and 17, now 17, 18. We just decided, let them finish. It was our daughter that we pulled, but not the boys. We didn't want the
And
fight.
we had our own justifications,
Yeah.
right or wrong. I think
We
we
just-
regret a little bit
Yeah,
now.
we just didn't want the fight. I mean, and I'm talking to two people who decided, okay, this is
We're
worth
going to have a
fighting.
fight.
Yes.
I don't
And
know.
we commend that, yeah, it's-
There are a lot of people that think, well, maybe I'm just too late. We did. That's what we thought. But you
Yeah.
don't subscribe to that, obviously.
No. I mean, gosh, we wish we'd done it with our daughter who is older. I mean, I don't think you're ever too late to learn what really matters in the world over what doesn't. So
No, that's completely fair. And it is, I mean, we really wrestle sometimes. I mean, this doesn't need to be a therapy session, but we do talk about this and the guilt and like kind of having to find a place to let that go, because we're doing something different, but it's
The numbers where
of it.
Christian education is exploding are with young kids, because it's easier with the little kids. When you start talking about teenagers, forget it. They've got their own minds made up, and they fight like cats and
Well,
dogs.
that
and
is one
mules.
thing that we do hear a lot
But
from our daughter, right?
We're seeing
yeah.
elementary level kids just exploding in Christian schools. We were just at one the other day for a fundraiser.
Yeah.
They're busting at the seams with the elementary,
Yeah.
with just a handful of high schoolers. So that's where I think a lot is kids, our kids' age, 14 through 17, 18.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones where right now you got to make a really tough choice. Do we make a hard pivot after most of your life has been in public school? You guys made that decision. Yeah.
Well, and he even said the other day, I mean, you know, we see it. He's in a safe learning environment, you know, all the time. But he even told me the other day when we were doing math, he goes, you know, I really feel very equipped with what I'm learning now. And so,
Wow.
you know, I think Amy's right. He's really grown as a critical thinker, and just all of our students, you know, the questions that they ask in class, you know, teaching her science, and it's like we can approach things from a biblical worldview, and you know, we can take a look at, you know, scripture and tie it all together, which is not something they could ever do.
Yes.
I think our son, as well as I can think of a handful of other students, our son never identified as a good student before. He just kind of, I don't like school. I'm excited for summer, you know.
Yeah.
Partly because that was cool, but now he identifies as a good student. Like, he is excellent at what he does each day, and the confidence level that presents is amazing.
And the leadership that he's taken on, it's just
Yep.
there's been times where, you know, because we've got two buildings where we're at right now, so he'll come over to the one building with some of the other staff before school, and he'll see something that's dirty, and he's gotten a vacuum out, before, because we clean everything a lot of times ourselves too, along with the church also. But you know, he'll get out a vacuum and he'll just like, hey, this is dirty, and I'll take care of it. So, and he's not the only one that's done that as well.
Does he also understand this is kind of a family business to a degree? If you want to, I mean, I know that's not the way you look at it. It's a ministry, but I mean, it is also your income. Is there a buy-in there that this is a family venture now?
I don't know. Somewhat, I would say, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, we don't think of it as a business, but I don't know. You know, he's a 16-year-old boy.
Oh, no, I do. Totally, I do. I just, that vacuum story, because I can't get my kid to pick up a
But
vacuum.
Well, he doesn't do that at home unless he's asked.
Yeah.
But he has taken buy-in. And, you know, there's also some beauty in the fact that we're really small right now, because, like, you have prayer groups and you have multi-age prayer groups. So there's elementary and secondary in each prayer group, right?
Right.
And so these younger kids really, like, our son has become a leader in so many ways, not only because he leads worship, but these kids look up to him. So that kind of makes him want to be better. Yeah. And that's a good thing.
It really is. I love hearing, the realness of it. I mean, the positive, the growth, the
doubt, I'm
the
sure,
benefit, but there's,
The doubt that creeps in.
Right. There has to be.
Let's forecast. Where do you now, after 7 months in, and you know we'll be finishing up a year before you know it? Forecast out now. What are realistic projections? Where do you see Refine KC in 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years? You gone that far out, or are you just day by day?
Oh, I'll tell you what, kind of day by day a little bit, to be honest with you. I think a lot of Christian schools in year 2 double.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a very statistically statistical fact, if I can get that word spit out. So I don't ever see Refine KC being huge, but that's not up to us. That's up to God. I'm sure, you know, a lot of Christian schools have started very, very small and grown to, 500, 1,000. And so if that's what God wants, then, that's what we'll do. But I really, it's been so great to get to know our students and to see them grow on a personal level, but also be able to interact with their families as well. Yeah. And I think for us, we don't ever want to lose just like being able to have a conversation with both of you.
Sure.
We don't want to lose that personalization with the students, with the families, because there's been times it's like, family struggle. It's like, okay, how can we pray for you? Or there's a family illness. How can we pray for you? What can we do, to help you?
Right.
Did you never, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but did you never see this school being, or you just didn't really assign it any expectation? You never saw it being huge? You saw it being a certain size, or did you just didn't really have a vision that way?
I guess for me, what God put on my heart is that, you know, we want to have a personal relationship with Christ. And so I think from a public school standpoint, I've taught in schools where we graduated 25 students a year to 600 students a year.
Okay.
And so my first 6 years when I taught in a rural district in Nebraska, you know, I had those same students sometimes 7th grade all the way through 12th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could build that personal connection with your kids,
Right.
and you could build that personal connection with the families too. So I just really feel that's important, because our kids are getting lost.
Yeah.
And they need not only other like-minded students, but they need strong adults in their lives, and they need people that, you know, can help them grow, whether it's for a year or maybe for 6 years or maybe for 13 years.
So what I think I hear you say, and it's an interesting point that I hadn't considered before. Maybe everybody starts a school and thinks, boy, I want this thing to get as big as my local public high school. But maybe that's not the way to think about it. Or at least you're saying you'd rather there be, I don't know, 20 refined KCs in the immediate area, each servicing a smaller group of students?
Yeah.
Is that the better way in your view?
I mean, we would love for every student seeking a Christian education, or every family, because parents make those decisions, to have one available to them.
Yeah.
And so if that means 20 refined KCs, that's so much better than one who can only service so many. Right now, we're in a church that's amazing. Not even our church, a church that's amazing that's come alongside us. But if we grow too much, we're going to be,
Right.
you know,
You outgrow
like,
your
we
space,
just
and
won't
then
be
you
able to be
have a
there.
whole new set of problems.
Yes,
Right.
which is definitely something
Yeah.
that is on our radar and not out of the question. But you know, it's just more things to pray about.
Yeah.
We don't know. We've definitely, like, instead of grasping this so tightly and planning so diligently, had to just really open it all up and say, all right, God, whatever you've got, because we know that his way is the way it's going to.
That's a huge. That I think that's a big piece of just this whole process in general. Whether you're
a
choosing
leap.
to homeschool, it is a leap. Like whether you're going to homeschool, whether you're going to pod school, whether you're going to set it all aside and take 10 kids in your home, or whether you're going to go find a church to partner with. And I think that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I come from the world of, you know, in broadcasting and in marketing, we're always selling, you know, and you're trying to sell seats, and you're trying to sell tickets, and you're trying to sell products, and you want them, you know, volume. You can't.
Maybe not.
Maybe this is not the way to think about Christian education.
We really, I mean, our staff, we really care, and we really love our students.
Yeah.
And so, but you know, we're with them all day, and again, we've seen them grow in so many ways, you know, from reading to math to just to see their hearts grow as well. It's just been so wonderful to see. So yeah, it just goes back to the, you know, like I said before, this one room schoolhouse mentality. You know, this, you know, you look at old videos and you know, my mom went to country school through 8th grade, and both my grandmas teach, you know, up the hill at a one room schoolhouse. And I think back to how well those families, you know, it's kind of rural America too, but those families were connected not just in school, but that was their community.
Sure.
And so that's something I think when you're smaller, like we are, you know, we're a community of people.
I think that idea, though, it sells itself a little bit too. You know, like you said, you're going to have the families that are looking for that are going to want that, and I think that's the piece of it that's important.
So for people that listen to this story and I've asked this before, I always like to ask people that have been through it now. I want to start a school. We've interviewed another couple he's a pastor, so he's kind of planting a church and opening a school in that church. A little different than you guys, who had an idea and found a facility, right?
Right.
So for the kind of the non-traditional, maybe church leader who wants to start a school, that's, I don't want to say it's easier. It's hard work, of course, but that seems maybe a little more template specific. I have a church. Let's start a school in this church. You guys had an idea to start a Christian school, and you had to go find it and start it and find a facility. So what would you say to somebody who has that on their heart? What do they need to know? I mean, besides, feeling the call and, making that leap and in faith, but what are kind of the semantic things that someone ought to know?
And finding a location specifically?
Or just kind of the idea of, I think
The
I
concept.
should start a Christian school in my community. What does that mean? Do people always understand what that might mean?
One of the first questions that we were asked at one of our big meetings, we had a meeting where I think 60 people showed up. And, we obviously don't have that many families. And a lot of those were the questions we talked about earlier. But they asked us what makes Refine KC different or better than any other option that we have. And at that point, we were kind of like, we don't really know. No clue. But now we can clearly say that personalized learning is our niche. That is where we are. We don't do 7th grade. We do, where is Joey? Like, is he reading at a 2nd grade level and his math is at a 6th grade level? Then that's Joey, and let's move him forward to his personal best. So I think personalized learning is our niche, and I think that was something that we weren't prepared to answer. But you want to piggyback?
I guess, are people too idealistic about it? I mean, there's sometimes people think, just like any other thing, I'm going to start a bakery. Oh, I didn't really count on having to get up at 1 a.m. There's just stuff that I think people don't always think through. They have a heart for it. Their heart's in the right spot, but maybe they're not always, thinking about what this means.
I think when we were looking for a location, and when we sent letters out to churches, that we thought, hey, this might work for us. It's a good location. They have, an adequate facility to get started. God will bring the people to come alongside of you. And that has been very, very true with the church that we're in. Their church was looking to use their facility more. And so I think we've seen that, not just in our families, but just in all the things that we've needed. We needed somebody to come along and help us write our 501c3, and we got help with that. I was stressing in August going, okay, I've never done payroll taxes and things like that before, like FICA and things like that. What does that look like? Well, we found a company that they were booked till January, and they said, hey, we're going to fit you guys in. There's just a lot of things where God's really been at work through this, that, if God's put it on anybody's heart to do it, pray about it. And, his plan is greater than ours. And so we've changed a lot, I think, over the course of, 7 months, obviously, from what it looks like day one to now.
Sure.
But I'd encourage them. And then the other thing is, I think, go visit or go talk to people. We've talked to a few people that have started Christian schools, or who are maybe a year or two ahead of us as well, and talked and said, okay, what's your journey been like? Every school startup is different. Right. There's things like Herzog does that, puts things together that are good tools to use. But in the grand scheme of things, every school is going to look different in terms of, whether it's location or the ages that you're serving. But if God's in it, God will provide just out of the time that we might always want.
Sure.
Right.
But you just have to be patient.
So if somebody was interested, so if a family's come along, they're interested, how can they go about reaching you? Where do they, go online? Is it Facebook? Is it phone number? How do they reach you?
So we have a website. It's refinekcschool.com. Okay. And then we also have Facebook and Instagram. We spend zero money on marketing, so that's what we use for all of our marketing. And we have a phone number on our website as well. They can call us.
And you're probably enrolling right now, I would assume, or getting ready to start enrolling for next year as well.
Enrollment is open for next year.
Okay.
And
awesome.
we'll stay open likely until the day school starts. So, yeah.
This is our first interview with somebody who's decided to start a school, and now we're what's so cool is to now get to watch and follow along. Maybe we'll check in another 7 months or a year and see what God has done. Yeah, this has been really exciting to see.
Really grateful to you,
it started from a conversation where you weren't really sure to do you feel better 7 months later than our first conversation?
I think we're more tired now. We were super excited then, and we're not excited, but we have gone through a lot of hard work.
There's reality. There's a reality, I'm sure.
Yeah,
right.
We have learned a we have learned a ton.
Yeah.
We really, really have.
That's
but
amazing.
It's been so worth it. So,
I love it. Well, I
Congratulations.
really appreciate
Well,
you
thank
guys coming on.
Yep.
well, thank
Thanks
you for having us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. Isn't it so great to talk? I just think it is so fun to see it in action.
As we recorded this, I was just blown away that it's been 7 months. It's fun to talk to people who, when we talked to them 7 months ago, they had no idea how this was going to go, and now they're 7 months in and they're tired, but it's work well done that they're proud of, and they have total faith that God's going to provide and make a way.
And I think they alluded to it. They didn't flat out say it like this, but I would say probably grow their faith in a way. I know you and I even talking about this and kind of where the direction where it's going to go and what we're going to do. It is where you are leaning more into what God is asking you to do and be bold with it. That's what they were doing, which I think is
I saw a
important.
let me see if I can find it quickly, because I literally just saw this today and I loved it. It popped up in my own feed, and I think it was. Now I'm not going to be able to find it because it just popped into my head as you and I were talking here.
Well, it's I don't know. I really love like it, and we laugh but I really would like to bring back I'd love to bring Glen Haven, bring them back in a year and just talk with them. Bring Refine KC back. We've talked with other schools as well, and I'd love to have that piece of where are you at, what's working, what's not, because it is encouraging to the people around us. Not just starting a school, but in maybe making that transition to a small school, to a pod school, to whatever it is.
Yep.
I think that would be
no
awesome.
doubt about it. It was something about maybe it's I'm going to screw it up, but it was really, really it was profound to me. It was basically that it maybe here it is. I'll be darned. I did find it. I told you I'd find it. Hang with me. Maybe your path is harder because your calling is higher. Maybe your path is harder because your calling is higher. You just feel like, gosh, this is a lot of work, and I don't know that it's paying off. But,
and we're in a culture that would say, well, I think actually we have a culture that would do one of two things. They would say, hustle, hustle, hustle harder until you get it, or go find your happiness. Go do, forget the hard and go do what's easier. And
what they're doing is hard.
Gosh, can you
It's
imagine?
hard, and I would imagine it could get kind of dispiriting.
Well, and just when he said, they're like Amy's salary now is what they're primarily, what they're using, or he didn't say that, but I kind of gathered from, they have other people to pay. They have other bills to pay now, and they have to rely on her one solo income. That's just a hard thing to do as a family, as a couple, and to take that leap, that risk. That's a deal. I'm really glad that we were able to speak with them and just kind of do that.
Always ask people to submit any kind of thoughts that you have. Give your reviews at Apple iTunes or send us emails, and you can do that, by the way, if you reach out to our addresses.
Yeah, so our email address is hello@makingtheleappodcast.com.
You got a couple.
I do. So we have had a few, and these did come in a little bit ago, but we always try to make sure that we're spacing things out. So not ignoring the people that send them, but this one was interesting because it is something that we have talked a lot about. It said, hello, I'm a huge Chris DeGaulle fan, so someone that obviously found us through your podcast.
I'm
and
already
radio
all
shows.
ears then.
I love it. He said, I've been listening for many years. I appreciate you guys starting this podcast because it seems hard to find information on this subject. My son has an IEP and is struggling to learn in school. I am desperately looking for other options in my area. I would love to find a local pod school in Abington, Pennsylvania. Are there resources in Abington? How can I find them? Paying for the school is a bit of an issue for us, and it kind of, talked a little bit about, we talked a little bit about this today, about just knowing that there will be some financial issues for people, finding the resources. That's specific, going out to Abington.
Well, the first thing, here's what we learned in this show, and what I hope, if you're listening, I would say.
And that was from Brian.
Brian, please ask.
Always.
Make sure if there is a school that's interesting to you, please ask them. At least go in and say, hey, I don't know. I've seen what your rates are. I don't know if I can make it work. Is there an option for me? Have the conversation. There's no pride in that. But this is a subject that I think we've pledged to do future shows on, and I don't have an answer that's adequate. I don't know if you do. That is kids with special needs. I hear this one a lot, and I shame on us for not getting the show done yet. We should. What about Christian schools or private schools for kids with special needs? What do we know about that?
And again, I think a lot of it boils down to, like they mentioned earlier, you have to pay a staff. If you want to have somebody on your staff that can navigate the world of IEPs, you have to pay them. So I think for schools that are, I think there are a lot of parents that want to find schools, but they don't have a person on staff that can work with an IEP, because that does take a specially trained, certified person to do. So yes, it is something I actually am working on, and it is not an easy thing.
Do they not exist?
They do. Our school just posted, they are looking for a special ed teacher. They're looking for someone to kind of direct special ed services, but it does open up another whole avenue that you have to staff, you have to train, you have to support, and that is a lot.
I would ask if there's anybody listening to this podcast who's in that space now.
Yeah.
If you know of a school, or you yourself are part of an IEP program or a special needs program in a Christian or private school setting, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to have you on to discuss how you're getting that done. I will confess that sounds like a major hole in the Christian education.
I do. I think
sphere.
It is 100%. I actually think, we spoke with a woman, Stephanie Smith. She has I want to make sure I say it correctly. She does a podcast called Key 3 Educators, and her goal is to help support teachers in the realm of Christian education. I think there are other people like her, and I am in the process of trying to find them, but I absolutely think, I could go back and get certified, recertified in my own area. I could add on special education, and if I were to then apply somewhere and go get hired, I think you run the risk when you have one teacher on board, depending on the size of your school. That is a lot to take on, and I think, again, becomes very specific, and so it's tough.
Well, then
it's
what
tough.
we're going to do is pledge to. That's going to be our new commitment: is to try to figure out how to do a show on kids.
Special ed. It is.
What does IEP stand for?
Individualized Education Plan.
Okay, so that could mean a lot, though.
It could, which is the issue. It can really cover
that
a
means
whole
sometimes
bunch.
Physical disabilities.
Could be
means
physical.
mental,
Could be
emotional?
intellectual. Right. Could be a whole bunch of different realms. And then you have something else called a 504, which maybe the student doesn't quite qualify for an IEP, but they do need some special modifications made. So within the world of special education, it is a lot to unpack. So you've got a lot happening.
Well, I can hear people say, well, then this is why public schools exist, and this is what public schools can do, and this is what private schools can't do.
This is actually a comment that I did get from somebody that messaged me and said, because we were talking probably about a month ago, we were talking and said, a lot of people do pick their schools based on the sports program or, those kinds of things. And she actually messaged me, and she's very, polite about it, but she said, we flat out picked it because of the services that our child needed. And we stayed because of that, because it wasn't an option anywhere else. And they specifically moved to an area for a school within a school district because they knew some of the other schools weren't doing as good of a job.
What about larger established Catholic schools? Do they have IEPs?
I think they have students with IEPs. Again, I don't know, because I think it is a wide open field in which to dive into. So it is.
We'll do
something
more on
that
this. We're not experts on it, obviously. We're showing that we don't know.
Looking in specific areas, I really, you just have to just start searching.
Yes, but please don't let cost be a thing. Just don't.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if I could myth bust anything about this notion of private education for your kid, this idea that it's unaffordable and it's unachievable because of the money, so I'm just not going to bother. Please don't do that.
I also think there are avenues in certain states, depending on what your state has. For in Missouri, for example, with the ESAs that we have, families can use that money to pay for services and then pay the tuition to go to a school. So if their school doesn't have services provided, that is one avenue. That is a way to kind of tweak the numbers a little bit.
Yeah.
So those are
I'd
pieces
be pretty
of it.
amazed if there's a Christian school out there that would say to you, if you called them, hey, I see what your tuition rates are. I would love to attend. I don't know that we can swing it. I'd be amazed if there's a Christian school that said, sorry, tough luck.
Right. No.
I can't imagine.
I would hope not. Yeah, or at least have the conversation.
Yeah.
And then we had an email from David, and he said, and this is kind of what we actually were just talking about, I just listened to your discussion where you talked about the reasons that parents choose public education. This made me laugh. Your hypothesis that people choose public education because of sports is flawed. I chose public education for my kids because of the wide variety of choices in public education. and I think he actually was maybe talking about private education versus public, but he said, one of my kids was able to attend a vocational school to learn skills for a career in early childhood education. Another one was in special ed, and a third kid was able to take classes in engineering. The variety is the reason we chose public education over private education. So he was saying, like, you're wrong. Like, they don't just stay for sports, they stay for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure if I go back and listen to that show, I said it's not universally true.
No, correct. And I think, yes. So I just wanted to, read that. And we all, as always, we appreciate the feedback because he's right. There's a lot of different reasons people stay. But when we are talking about why don't they make that initial leap or check, I do think it comes down to just a few main reasons, but of course there could always be others.
I mean, if your kid knows he wants to be a pastry chef, I'll readily confess the Christian school down the street may not be the best place for your kid to become a pastry chef.
But you know what? There are some schools. I know we have an option that just started at where our daughter attends. A parent comes in and she's teaching horticulture a couple times, to some students. Like, I think, and kind of what the Barnards were saying too, like they have option. You can bring people in to do certain specific things. So it's just interesting. But as always, we appreciate the people reaching out, sending us the information, sending us questions. You can always find us, like I said, at hello@makingtheleappodcast.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Making the Leap Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at making_the_leap podcast. And anytime you download an episode, anytime you take a listen, as always, we appreciate those 5-star reviews. Leave us a comment. That always helps us as well and gives us some good branching off points to talk about.
And we also just found out that we're coming up on a year anniversary soon. 1 year of doing Making the Leap.
Pretty quick.
Thanks to your support for being able to continue to do this. It's only because you listen and download it and refer other people to it that we can continue to do it for almost a year now.
Amazing, right? When you think about the time.
Thanks for downloading and subscribing, and we will see you next time right here.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. Please rate and comment on the show, as well as subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Making the Leap.